Welcome back to Get Paid for Your Pad. Today I am in Savannah, Georgia. I'm visiting one of our revenue managers here who lives here. It's always good to meet your team members in person. We're spending a lot of time on Zoom these days. And so it's great to meet our team members in person. Our revenue manager, his name is Thomas. He's been on the podcast as well. He'll probably be back on the podcast in the future because he's doing some pretty cool stuff for us. He's driving great results for our clients, and he's building new systems, coming up with new ideas. So very happy to have him on the team, and it's great to meet him here in Savannah, Georgia. It's my first time in Georgia and in Savannah as well. It's a pretty cool town, very historic town. It's like an old Spanish settlement. There's a very big harbor here, and so every hour or so there's a massive container ship passing by, which is pretty spectacular to see. The weather is also amazing here. It's like 75, 80 degrees. It's sunny most of the days, and so I'm really enjoying my time here. If you haven't been, I highly recommend it. Savannah, Georgia, great place to be. We're going to go kayaking on Saturday, which I'm really excited about as well. So yeah, very happy to be here. Very friendly people as well. I've noticed everybody says hi and everybody wants to chat. Sometimes I don't quite understand everybody because people have a really cool accent. It sounds really cool, but I sometimes have a little trouble understanding it. But today on the podcast, I wanted to cover some questions from the audience. Since I kind of relaunched the podcast, if you will, I took a break for a couple months, and now I'm back doing 2 podcasts a week. And so I've been receiving questions. Some people have been commenting on the YouTube videos as well. So we publish all of our podcasts on YouTube, which is very useful to watch it if we're sharing the screen, so you can actually see what we're talking about. This podcast will be just audio. I'm going to answer some questions. I got 4 questions that people have emailed me in the last few weeks. And so I wanted to dive into those questions. They were all good questions and pretty common questions that we get. And so I'm going to go through those. And if you have a question about revenue management or about anything else related to short-term rentals, feel free to email me at jasper@freewyld.com. And then I will cover your question maybe on a future podcast, or I will respond to the email. So the first question is around the Airbnb photo tour functionality. There seems to be a lot of confusion around this functionality that Airbnb launched. I think it was like maybe a year ago or a year and a half ago or so that Airbnb launched this new functionality. And there are 2 questions around this. The first question is around the order of the photos. So this person says that they are not using the photo tours because they want to be in control of the order of the first 5 photos. And they're saying if you set up the photo tour, Airbnb is going to decide what photos to show first, and they feel that they can do a better job at choosing those photos. Well, first of all, I agree with that. You are probably in a better position to choose the first 5 photos, than the Airbnb algorithm, because you know your properties well. And I found that the algorithm in general is not necessarily doing a great job. Maybe that will improve in the future, but I agree. I would choose those first 5 photos strategically. You definitely want to show the most attractive aspects of your listing, but also you want to show different aspects of your listing. So one mistake that I see a lot of hosts make is they'll have 3 out of the 5 photos show kind of the same thing. And that's not really helpful, because the purpose of the first 5 photos is really to get the interest from the viewer, so that the viewer will then dive deeper into the listing. Most people view multiple listings before they book. And so it's a good idea to show different things in those first 5 photos to kind of maximize the chance that something will catch the eye of the viewer and spike interest in digging deeper into the listing. But here's the thing. If you set up your photo tour in Airbnb, you can still decide what the first 5 photos should be. So you still have that flexibility. And I've heard this before. I've heard other people on podcasts and on Instagram and such say that they don't like the photo tours because you lose control of the order, but that's really not true. If you go into your Airbnb listing on the back end, there's an option where you can click on all photos, and you can actually drag the photos. And so you can still show the the first 5 photos that you want to show. However, once you click into the listing, once you click on one of the photos, then Airbnb is going to sort them by space. And so like on the front page of the Airbnb listing, you can still see the first 5, but then if you click on a photo, then it will go to the photo tour functionality. Now, I do recommend that you use this functionality for a couple of reasons. Number one is there's a reason why Airbnb introduced this, right? It's a better user experience. The photos are ordered by space, and you can also add amenities to each of your spaces when you're using that photo tour functionality, which means that that will help conversion because people can see exactly what kind of amenities each of the spaces have. It's a better flow for the viewer to go through the photos going space by space. Also, just the whole experience is better, and I'm sure that Airbnb has spent a lot of time looking at data and conversion rates to figure out what the best way is to show these photos. And so I think it's a better user experience. Number 2 is, when Airbnb launches a new functionality, they typically reward the hosts that are using it. And so I do think there's a benefit there as well. It will probably give you a bit more visibility. I don't know for sure, but that's what I've just seen over the last 13 years that I've been using Airbnb. Typically, the listings that use the functionality, that use all the options that Airbnb gives you, those listings are typically shown higher in the search results. So I think those are the 2 reasons that I do recommend you use the photo tour. Now, the second question is also related to the photo tours. So this question is like, hey, I want to use the photo tours, but every time I set them up inside of my PMS, a couple days later on Airbnb, everything is mixed up and it's changed again. And so it seems like really hard to set up these photo tours, which is also true. It is kind of clunky and difficult to set up. Each PMS has different API connections. And so some PMSs, like we use Hostfully, some PMSs you can actually set up your photo tours completely inside of the PMS and it will sync correctly to Airbnb. Now, I will admit, there's a little bit of trial and error and a little bit of a learning curve on how to do that. But, what I would recommend is just take one listing, right? And try to set it up correctly. And then once you figure out with your PMS how to do it, then go ahead and do the rest of your listings. We have a couple revenue management clients who literally set up like 30, 40 listings. And then a couple days later, they were all gone because they didn't do it correctly. And so then you have to do it all over again. So really, maybe chat to support and really figure out like what's the best way to do this for your PMS. And then once you figured it out, go ahead and implement it for all of your other listings. One thing I'll note specifically for Guesty users, and we have quite a few of our clients that are using Guesty. And what I've noticed is that when you have Guesty, there's two ways of syncing to your Airbnb listing with Guesty. There's a full sync and there's something that they call limited sync. And so I've noticed that if you are on full sync with Guesty, that seems to cause challenges if you want to use the photo tour, because Guesty will then override whatever you put in Airbnb. But if you're using limited sync, then you can fully control the photo tours inside of Airbnb, and then Guesty won't override it. So that's just one tip for any of the Guesty users out there. Just check if you're on full sync or limited sync. And if you want to use the photo tours, it seems like limited sync is the way to go for that. So that's on the photo tours. Next question is a general question around the use of pricing tools. It seems like most professional hosts are using a pricing tool at this point, but there are still hosts who are hesitant to use the pricing tool. And this listener asked me this question of, hey, I tried to use the pricing tool, but the pricing seemed very off. Some of the dates are priced way too high. Some of the dates are priced way too low. Maybe the tool doesn't have enough data since I'm in a small market. Well, I can tell you that, in most markets, Price Labs will have enough data because what they do is if there's not enough listings in your neighborhood, Price Labs will actually widen the search. So they'll look in a larger area to find more listings and to find more data. So I'm sure there are some examples if you're absolutely in the middle of nowhere and there's no other Airbnbs if you're on a tiny little island in the Pacific or something, the next nearest island is like 500 miles away, then yeah, that might be a challenge. But even then, using a pricing tool has a lot of advantages. It's not just the data, but it also allows you to do a lot of things. You can you can set up your pricing exactly how you would do manually inside of your PMS, or even if you set it up manually, set manual prices on Airbnb, you could do that inside of the pricing tool too, right? You don't have to use all the different tools and functionalities that the pricing tool offers. But even if you do that, even if you're still setting manual prices inside of the tool, there's still functionality that you can use that you otherwise would not be able to use. Right? So for example, you can set dynamic minimum night stay settings. That's something that you can't do in the PMS. So you could, for example, you could say, hey, I want to do like a 3-night minimum stay, but then like 30 days out, I want to do a 2-night minimum stay, and 7 days out, I want to do a 1 night. You can also say that, for example, you can do adjacency logic where you say, hey, if I already have a booking, then a booking that will connect to the existing booking, I will allow a lower minimum night stay. And you can use orphan gap logic as well. So you could say like, hey, I only want to do a 1-night stay if I have a 1-night gap. So I would only want to use the 1-night stays to fill up the gaps. And then you could even add a premium or a discount to that price as well. Right? So even if you want to use manual pricing and you're not really trusting the data inside of the tool, or if you think there's not enough data, you can still use the tool, and it's still way easier to manage the pricing inside of a pricing tool than on the OTA or in your PMS. I think for most of the markets that I've seen, Price Labs will have enough data for it to have an added value. However, I do agree with the fact that pricing is not always in line with what it should be. So we do make some manual adjustments. We do make quite a lot of manual adjustments, especially when it comes to peak dates. Okay, so for example, I'll give you an example. College football is a big deal in the States, as everybody probably is aware of. We are in a number of college football markets. And one thing that Price Labs does very well is even though the games aren't known yet, well, right now the games are known, but even before the games are known, like Price Labs will add a premium to a lot of the future potential college football weekends to kind of protect your pricing. Or at least it seems like they started doing that recently. I'm talking about Price Labs because that's what we use, but I'm sure Wheelhouse and Beyond Pricing have similar functionalities. But one example that I'll share is one of our markets. I was looking at the college football weekends. They're all in September, October, and November, and our pricing was like crazy high. Price Labs was putting the prices at like $2,500, $3,000, $4,000. It was so high that it was actually the price that we had in the tool was actually the safety price. So PriceUp has like a maximum safety price that they build in, and all of our prices were on that safety level, which was way too high. To give an example, let's say in one market, like a 3-bedroom, we actually got a booking for like a 3-bedroom at like $1,800, which is huge, right? That's a huge amount for 1 night, right? For a 3-bedroom. And this person booked 2 nights. So the total booking value was like over $4,000 for that particular booking. But anyway, that's a great price. Price Labs was putting it like $4,000, and that was just like way too high. And so what we do is, for those type of dates, like we look at like, hey, what's like a really good price for us, but not a price where we're not pricing ourselves out of the market, right? So we look at like what's the highest price that we ever booked a 3-bedroom, in the history of the listing, right? And so for this unit, I saw that the maximum price that we've ever gotten was around $1,500. And so I thought, okay, you know what? Let's put it $300 higher. Let's see if we can get a bit higher than our record ADR. And that was still a couple $100 above the highest price that I saw competitors were charging. And so it's kind of like, it's realistic. It's not unthinkable that somebody would book it, but it's a high price. It's a very high price, right? And that's kind of like how we set those maximum prices for the peak dates. And so we would actually go in and just set that as a maximum price, because we don't want to set the price as a fixed price, because as we get closer to the check-in date, we want to lower that price. And so if you set it fixed, then Price Labs is not going to change it, and then that price is just going to stick at that level. And so when you set a maximum price, when you curb your pricing with manual overrides using the maximum price functionality, then it will cap it at that rate. But then as we get closer, it will also lower it, and it will still be a dynamic price, but you're just capping it at a certain maximum. So that's an example where we do put some adjustments there, but also you got to realize too is that you're in control of the tool. The tool is just the prices that the tool calculates are based on the settings that you put in the pricing tool. So if you think the prices are too high, you got to adjust the settings, right? There's a lot of settings. Like every single setting that the algorithm used to calculate the prices is one that you can change, right? Like demand sensitivity, seasonality, these are all things that you can adjust. So if you notice like, hey, my prices for the high season are too high, right? And let's say for the low season, maybe they're too low. That means your seasonality factor is too aggressive, and you can change that setting. So you can tell Price Labs like, hey, put the seasonality lower, and then that will probably put those prices more in line. Same with demand. If you see your peak dates are way too high, you can set a less aggressive demand sensitivity factor, and that will change it too. If somebody is telling me like, hey, PriceLabs is pricing my portfolio incorrectly, then my response is no, then probably your settings are incorrectly, right? There are a couple exceptions to that rule, like the one I just mentioned. So the pricing tool in the end of the day is a tool that will empower you to either save time or price more effectively, but you got to use it correctly. You can't just turn it on and put some random numbers in there and then expect it to set optimal prices. It's not a tool that just does everything automatically, right? It's still, I guess you can compare it to a car, right? Compare it to a car. Right now, you have cars that can pretty much drive automatically. But I would say at this point, the pricing tool is just a car that you have to sit in the seat and you have to drive. You have to steer, you have to push the gas and the brake and all that in order for the car to, get you from A to B. But in the near future, I wouldn't be surprised if there's going to be companies that are going to build tools that will do a lot more automatically. So maybe as an analogy, maybe this year or maybe next year we'll have like a kind of like a pricing tool Tesla where you just have to sit and watch, right? You don't actually have to steer and you don't have to do anything, but you still need to watch it to make sure that it does the correct thing. I wouldn't be surprised if that's going to come out pretty soon, but at this point it's just a car. So if you don't steer it, it's not going to do what you want it to do. So I hope that makes sense. And yeah, the cost of a pricing tool is so low that I just cannot imagine that any host in this world in any world does not. I can't imagine that you can get the value that it costs. Like a pricing tool, typically it's like $15-20 per listing. That value, you're going to get that value back, regardless of how many of the functionalities you're going to use, you're going to get that value. So I don't think there's any reason really not to have a pricing tool. But all right, next question. What's the best way to set up last minute pricing? My prices are too high last minute, and so I lower them manually with manual overrides, and it takes a lot of time. If I set my last minute pricing factor more aggressively, then the prices will be pushed to my closer to my minimum prices, but then my weekends become too cheap. So I want to keep my weekends higher. And so now what I'm doing is I'm just like manually putting all the weekdays lower in the next couple of weeks. And it's taking a lot of time. What's the best way to manage this, or what's the best way to manage last minute pricing in general? That's a really good question. There are a couple ways that you can your last minute pricing. You can lose the last minute pricing setting. And again, I'm talking about Price Labs because that's what we're using, but I know that the other tools have these type of functionalities too. You can use the last minute pricing factor to push your prices down, or you can use the occupancy settings as well. So you can tell the tool that if you don't have any occupancy in the next 0 to 7 days or the next 0 to 14 days, you can tell the tool exactly how much to lower the price based on that occupancy. So that's another way to bring the prices down last minute if you're not booked. And so those are kind of the two things that you can do. If you want to do manual overrides, one quick tip is don't do it at a listing level, but do it either at the account level or at the group level. All right, so in Price Labs, there's 3 levels where you can set your prices. On the listing level, the group level, and the account level. The listing level overrides the group level, and the group level overrides the account level. So let's say you have 20 listings, and you have like 10 listings in market A, and you have 10 listings in market B. If you want to lower the prices for, let's say, the next 7 days, but only the weekdays for the entire portfolio, then you would go to the account level, you go to customizations, you go to account level, and then you click on the calendar, and then you can just put the manual override on the calendar for the entire account, and that will bring down the prices for all of your 20 listings, whether they're market A or market B. If you only want to lower the prices for market A, what you do is you create two groups. Okay, you create group A and group B, and then you go on the group calendar, and then for whatever group you want to lower the prices, you set the manual overrides on the group level. So that's a much more effective way of doing that. Now, if you don't want your weekends to go down, there's a better way of doing this, actually, like without having to do any manual overrides. What you can do is you can set a minimum weekend price. Okay, so let's say you have a listing and your minimum price, let's say, is $99, and you want that $99 to be the price in the last 7 days, for example. Then what you could do is you could go into your occupancy pacing settings, and you could set that between 0 and 7 days. You could put like a minus, you could put a minus 90% discount on that date range. And what that does is then Price Labs will bring your prices down 90%, which pretty much guarantees that you're going to hit that $99 minimum. But then if you set it, let's say on the weekends, you don't want to go lower than $149, what you do is you just set your minimum weekend price at $149, and then you use that very aggressive occupancy profile, and then essentially your prices in the next 7 days will always be $99 for the weekdays and $149 for the weekends. You can also set the weekend pricing as a percentage. So you could say like, hey, I want my weekends to be 20% more or 30% more than my minimum price. So that's the most effective way to manage your last minute pricing. If you have a very aggressive strategy where you want your last minute pricing always to hit your minimum, which in the low season, that's usually the best strategy, because when there's very low demand, if your minimum price is $99 and you're in the low season and it's last minute and it's a weekday, if you're not hitting your minimum price in that scenario, then you're never going to hit your minimum price. And that means that your minimum price is too low, right? Because if you don't want to hit your minimum price in that scenario, then you should raise your minimum price, because then you would never hit it. And then what's the point of having the minimum price in the first place, right? So unless you kind of have it as some sort of safety, but you don't actually want to hit it, but you should raise it then anyway. If you never hit your minimum price, then the whole purpose of the minimum price is kind of gone, right? So hope that helps. These are the questions that I received in the last couple of weeks. Again, if you have a question about revenue management or any question, for that matter, feel free to email me at jasper@freewyld.com. And Freewyld is spelled as FREEWYLD. And then I will either respond to your email or I will cover your question on a future podcast. So with that said, I am going to go outside and enjoy Savannah, enjoy the beautiful weather here, and maybe try some of that southern food. And with that said, I hope you have a great weekend. Thank you for listening, and we will be back. Oh, and before I forget, I want to share a resource, as always. So today, the resource that I will share is a checklist that you can use to optimize your Airbnb listings. Okay, very important these days to have completely optimized Airbnb listings, because otherwise your listing is not going to convert as well, or people won't be able to find it. So if you go to Freewyld Foundry, and again, Freewyld is with a Y, freewildfoundry.com/checklist. Okay, if you type that into your URL in your browser, you will go straight to our advanced Airbnb listing optimization checklist. Okay, you don't even have to put your email or nothing. This link goes straight to that resource. As it's about, how many pages is it? 18 pages or so. So go ahead, download it. Feel free to share it with all your hosting friends. It's pretty extensive. It also has a section with the most missed Airbnb optimizations. It also has the link where you can request Airbnb categories. I did a previous podcast on that. So if you haven't requested your Airbnb categories yet, go ahead and listen to the podcast that I did a couple of weeks ago, or maybe last week it was. And make sure you request your categories. The link is in the PDF. And with that said, that's all for today. Have a great weekend. Thank you for listening. We'll be back on Monday. Bye-bye.